Here we go.
And so you think that'll get rid of the itching entirely, that cream?
Yes. Oh, so Eli, we're starting.
Oh, no. Yeah.
Well, I'll cut that out of the podcast feed.
Cool. Sure. Yeah. Just cut it. Don't worry about that, everybody.
I'm sure it's not as big as you think it is.
That's
the growth.
Yeah. I wasn't talking about my penis.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So, anyway, welcome to my channel. This is the Jerb the Humanist channel. This is already the best episode I've gotten. For those of you who are new, I do video essays and hangouts. The hangouts are available on the podcast feed, Jerb the Humanist, but you have to watch my face for the videos. Follow me on Twitter at Jerbivore. And today I have someone I consider a good friend of mine. His name's Eli Bosnick. He is a garlic bread aficionado, a Santa Con enthusiast, a Jewish meditation guru, and a religious film critic who advocates for public licking. And there's rumors that you have like a blog sometimes. Is that true?
You know, I've heard that rumor, but even I can't find it at this point, so I'm starting to think it's not true.
You're supposed to do yes and, Eli. What kind of improv comment?
Yes, the worst.
This is me teaching you how to do comedy because you obviously haven't been successful up to this
Lord
point.
knows I need all the comedy advice I can get.
Absolutely.
My favorite sketch I have ever written, and it was entirely for me, and no one liked it but me and my buddy. But my buddy and I used to do a 2-man show at the People's Improv Theater here in New York. We did it a couple other New York places. And my favorite sketch we ever wrote is we would walk out at the front of the show and we'd say, hey, we're going to start things off with a little bit of improv. Can we get a profession? And someone would say like dentist. And then we would freeze in terror and stare at each other for a solid minute. And we would just be like, oh. And then slowly but surely he would be like dentist. And I would just go, dentist, yes. And dentist. And look, it was so awkward and it wasn't that funny, but it's my favorite sketch ever. And I love it. I love it in a deep spiritual part of my heart.
I think you and I have a mutual admiration for media that pisses people off.
Right.
I don't know if that's media. It's a medium. So
it's a medium. I was in that moment a media that pissed people off.
That's great. Wow. We could already go on tangents, but how are you doing today, Eli?
I'm good. I spent my morning teaching and I completely destroyed my voice. And I have a movie to watch about how alien abductions are actually demons from hell trying to drive you away from Jesus. And then I've got to watch a movie about the life of Joseph Smith. But right now I'm here with you. So absolutely, I'm grateful for every second I get.
Yeah, absolutely. You've got too many podcasts. The one you're referring to right now is God Awful Movies. One of my favorites. Listen to it every week. But one thing about you that I like, and I told you this online before, you seem to have like multiple personas. Definitely more so. There's like a spectrum. And most of the time you're on the crazy end, especially like in citation needed podcast. I think you just go across the line and then you punt a Hail Mary and you double that amount.
I draw a new line across that. Yeah.
Yeah. But there is this very tender and thoughtful part of Eli Bosnick that I very much enjoy that we don't get to hear very much. And maybe it's good because then it's always a gift. But it's very nice to talk to Eli the person as opposed to
Eli
whoever you are.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and
yeah,
I appreciate you saying that. It means a ton, and it's very purposeful, and it's something that we sort of draw specific lines for in our shows because it's hard to be a good ally and a good representative and a listener and be a dick joke comedian, right? They just don't work, right? Mm-hmm. The quiet thoughtfulness that we want to present as a public face that I think is very important is good and has its place, but while creating spaces like Citation Needed, where you can kick off your shoes and just laugh, right, at the uproarious silliness of it. One of the things that I'm really proud of, and I sort of take Noah and Heath's cue from this, is that there's two worlds, right? And we very clearly delineate between the two. There's sort of the worlds of inside the podcast, which are wacky and hectic and funny. And then whenever we get a chance, when we step out of those, we have these wacky characters, but when people say, like, what are your actual thoughts? We try to be as kind as possible to put as much love and allyship and sort of goodness into our community we can, because I think that if there's a corner of the atheist or secular space that we occupy, it's that, like, we want to be the dirty joke friends who have your back against assholes, right? Like, we don't want the edgy, edgelord douchebags to have all the dick joke humor, because they're the ones who are unafraid to say it. So the little niche that we occupy is like the friends who care about you, but will also make JonBenet Ramsey jokes on their show. So you get to have your cake and eat it too.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I know I put up a photo of us doing a face-off, and maybe that's some that's mild, very mild false advertising, because I did want some thoughtful Eli before we actually brawled, because I did actually want to talk about your role as a Jewish meditation guru. I do want to thank you, because when you were your thoughtful self on Serious Inquiries Only, I think that was last May, based on my judgment of when I started meditation. I have a Buddhist aunt who's, nudged me to meditate. I'd seen figures here and there. Sam Harris thinks it'll change the world. Bob Wright thinks it'll change the world. Well, I like Bob Wright. I don't want to lump them together. But I don't know if you know this. I have ADHD, and I think aside from meds, meditation might be one of the best things I've ever done for my ADHD. And since I listened to you on that podcast, and I was like, well, why don't I just try this thing? Like, it's possibly like helped radically shift the way I behave. But I will say it's also meds. Like, the meds have helped a lot too.
Obviously. Yeah, no, we're not replacing the meds. But yeah, I mean, I actually hear that feedback a lot. I've been pretty open about also working with my mental illness and how meditation helps me. And I think one of the things that really makes the experience transformative for people, which makes it different than the sort of wooey way in which we're societally introduced to it, is when we understand that meditation is an exercise in failure, and that it's okay to do that. That, like, the practice of meditation is trying to focus on an object of thought, getting distracted, recognizing that distraction, and starting again. And when you realize that that is not failing to meditate, that is not you being bad at meditation, it is in fact you practicing concentration, practicing mindfulness, which is where the term comes from. It sort of opens it up, and those benefits become self-evident. But to credit where credit is due to Sam Harris, it is an experience that is impossible to describe, right? It's really easy to experience, but you can sit across from someone for hours and be like, no, it's really good. And it's, you recognize the thinker of thoughts, and they're like, hey man, if you have shrooms, just share some shrooms with me. You don't have to hide those. You can give me some of your some of your weed.
You guys came to Denver too early.
I know, we
gotten
missed
you
out.
easier.
Oh,
but yeah. No, it's really good, and it has a lot of philosophical implications. Like, I think the Buddhists were very right. Like, it's a kind of shit posty thing to say yourself doesn't exist, and then when you like try and concentrate on your breath, like if it were just like me, the ghost in the machine, like I just pull down the lever and hold it there for whatever the lever is that's labeled focus on your breath for 20 minutes or whatever. And it's impossible to do. Like, there's no ghost in the machine. And it sounds like a shit post and it's absurd. It is like, it's a stupid thing to think. Like, of course I exist and you exist, but like, it's also really true that like we're not in control of ourselves,
Right.
you know?
Absolutely. One of the I'm forgetting his name now. He's a super wooey dude who wrote one of the foundational early books on meditation, and his name will come to me, I'm sure, 20 minutes after we stop recording. But he talks about life without a head and
Mhm.
how the object of his early meditation was the recognition that he did not have a head, which is again an insane thing to think about. But if you bring your attention to where you think your head is versus where your head actually is, you recognize that this idea, this constant illusion that we all live in of riding around behind the vehicle of our eyes, right? That this is my arm, but who that arm belongs to is other, right? The idea that our knees are bad, but I am hungry, right? This differentiation, this arbitrary differentiation that we make between the self and the body. What meditation allows you to do, as wooey as it sounds, is it allows you to blur those lines just momentarily as a practice, right? For microseconds at a time. And that is truly all you're practicing, is blurring that line between self and body, between attentionness and consciousness.
Hmm. Yeah, I really want to ask you this because last summer I biked. There's a place in Boulder called Chautauqua. It's really funny that it's called that, and I've gone there to meditate before. That's a Robert Pirsig joke, but
Mhm.
um, uh, one time I went there and there was a brass band concert happening for kids. And like, I was like, "Ugh, I'm not going to be able to concentrate." But, I was like, you know what? 10 minutes, I'm just going to sit here and try. And like, for like brief, I don't know, parts of a second, fractions of a second, it turns out that their repertoire was like Disney in brass band. So it was all songs I knew, like Prince Ali, A Whole New World, just all the Disney stuff. And I'm like, there's no way I won't be able to to recognize the song and like hear the band. But I was like, you know what? I'm going to try to hear the music as it is, not like in terms of like the notes and the rhythm and the song with the lyrics that come with it, but like just the sound coming into my ears. And I didn't succeed entirely, but like you can almost just there's like a little glimpse of what things are like absent your interpretation. There's just like almost a little peek at
Yeah,
what you're looking at. And I think that's what you're getting at a little
yeah,
bit.
it's like juggling, it's like magic or any other skill. I don't know if you ever did any of that stuff, fire twirling or any of that kind of stuff, but there's this moment when you're learning those things, juggling especially, where you go, and just for a second, you haven't learned it yet, but just for a second, you get it, and you're like, oh, oh, and then everything comes crashing down because you're overthinking it, and but that is the process of meditation, right? Is you have just a moment where you're viewing your thoughts, right? Where you are not the actors talking on the stage of consciousness, but you are the stage itself. That's the juggling moment where you're like, oh, I did it. And did it, and did it, and then of course you're like, my third grade girlfriend is on Facebook right now, and the constant chattering. And I bet if I tweeted this, then people would like it. I bet you should unretweet that. That is always there, and the wave comes crashing down. But the metaphor that I love, which is that meditation is like temporarily stepping behind a waterfall, right?
Yeah,
That we're to me, I think is very useful. And
that's
again,
the
it's
Dan
just
Harris one. Yeah.
yeah, Dan Harris, who I love, and whose book "Meditation for Fidgety Skeptics" is sort of like the gift book. I don't know if you can. I'm actually out of copies right now, but I have like 12 copies of his book that I keep at all time. And then whenever anyone talks to me about meditation, I'm like, here, buy this. This is for you. This is my gift. And I just buy a copy every time I'm in a bookstore.
Nice. I will say, and I do want to get on to our next topic, but um, because I associated meditation fairly closely with Sam Harris for like a good 3 or 4 months once I started, like one of the continuous thoughts that would pop in would be Sam Harris, and then I would just like start getting angry because
Well, yeah, and that's the interesting thing is that with the combination of tech bro culture and meditation, like when you hear that Jack goes on meditation retreats and then comes back and he's like, I'm sorry, I can't think of a single world leader in history I would ban from Twitter. You're just like, how do you spend this much time on your consciousness and end up this much of a douchebag? It's like finding out someone goes on like a biking trip and got fatter. Right? It's just like, yeah, no, I spent a month in this health spa and I came back 400 pounds heavier. What? That's not how it's supposed to go. So, and honestly,
yeah.
I think that like in the secular community, especially the liberal secular community that you and I inhabit, in our sort of little corner of the podcast sphere, I think a lot of people are reticent to meditate because it is associated with Sam, right? Because you go like, oh, you should meditate. And they're like, oh, you mean Sam Harris's thing? And you got to be like, I mean, Sam, he's well.
Yeah, being on the internet and openly being atheist like already sets off just like a few red flags. And not from the religious community, just like, oh no, it's our atheism, like coming in my
from your fellow atheists, right?
Yeah, exactly.
When someone tells me they're an atheist, and I think we all have this reaction, we all sort of do that frozen like, right? Because there's sort of these three atheist communities. There's the old school book atheists, right? Which are the like philosophy professors. The last book they read was Bertrand Russell. And they're like, I don't know if you know this, but Jesus was not the son of God. Boom, I nailed it. Good job, Elizabeth. Right. And this is the people you meet at conventions and in the proper like movement, right? The FRF people. These are people who went through like, I was in 1945. I was an atheist in Alabama. And you're just like, I can't imagine what you went through. There's the second community, which is us, which is sort of like the pre-internet and post-internet atheists who were like, yeah, oh my gosh, new atheism. We are the movement. Hitch slap. Like, I'm going to watch compilations of Sam Harris making great things on tape. And then we all watched it slip through our fingers into shitlordery. And we were just like, oh, no, what's happening? Oh, everyone's a dick now. No, why did we all turn to dicks? And then the third is the group of people who like happen to be atheists, but are just dedicated to shitlordery, who whenever you meet a new atheist, you have to be like, I'm not one of those guys. Just to clarify, women are people. I think that very strongly.
Yeah, I've definitely done that on like dating apps for sure.
You have to.
Yeah, like because I do want to normalize atheism, but also like maybe it's a little too normal. I don't know.
Well,
but it's
normalizing atheism, like, because I live in New York City, you live in a super liberal part of the world as well. Yeah. But like, okay, I don't know if you had told people where you live, and I stopped myself just in case I was about to dox you.
Don't worry about it.
I live in New York. Everyone in New York is an atheist. The Orthodox Jews in New York are atheists, right? Everyone's an atheist. So then it's like the question becomes, okay, you're an atheist, so what, right? Mm-hmm. Because I think in certain progressive parts of the country, the question becomes, what are you doing with your atheism, right? Are you an atheist for atheism's sake? Are you an atheist in that you answer this particular like trivia question correctly? Or are you an atheist in the sense that like your humanism infuses your views of social justice? Because atheism without social justice is pointless. It's trivia, right? And it's not even interesting trivia.
It's like one little fact that's wrong, right? Okay, so now that we've established that Buddhism is good and atheism is toxic, I want to move on to our next topic, which is this is something I think we've been going back and forth on, and we haven't I think our friend Jill, when she was still working for Pathos, she wrote a blog post like in response to you. I think we've tweeted back and forth, we've Facebook commented back and forth. And I think there's like some fundamental disagreement between us two about the nature of religion. And I think there's like 3 points to address, maybe. And I thought this would be a good venue to finally just get it out, and then if it goes badly, then we just each other for the rest of our
Start
lives.
weeping.
But yeah, but
start a 2-person flame war that no one cares about. But
yeah,
us.
Exactly.
Did you hear his definition?
Yeah, and maybe Jillian, but she has enough. She has enough common sense to just ignore the whole thing and
ignore both of us.
Yeah, exactly, because we're just two dudes doing what dudes do. But I think there's like 3 major points that we kind of disagree with. I don't know if any of them are foundational, but let me bring these up and let me see if you agree. And so I have them written down. One of it is all religion necessarily bad, or is it bad by necessity? 2, is religion the fundamental problem with all of social ills? And I think those are 2 separate questions.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's because you could have something that's necessarily bad, but it like, I don't know, like hemorrhoids are necessarily bad, but I'm not going to attribute poverty to hemorrhoids. And then I think, on a slightly separate note, I think we have a different model of how religion functions, which ties into some of our arguments. And that's like, I think you have sort of a religious essentialism picture.
Exactly
like,
yes.
Yeah. And like, maybe I'm a little too postmodern, but like, I just kind of like throw like any essence out of the window. But like, would you agree that this is something we've been going back and forth on?
Absolutely.
Or is there anything you want to add?
No, the thing that I was thinking was that I think the core of where we disagree, or the core of where I may be wrong, is that I am a religious essentialist. And everything that I think we may see things differently on, or have different approaches to, comes from my view as a religious essentialist.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So that's good, because like, I wasn't sure if you would agree with that, like not the question, but like the meta disagreement. But I think that is interesting, and I do want to get into it. But recently, you put out a challenge on Scathing Atheist. I guess the big podcast. It's apparently something you've been doing for years. And that's your $100 challenge. What is that one?
So here's my $100 challenge.
Yeah.
If you can find a religious institution that has not directly funded evil, I will give $100 to the charity of a person's choice. Now, here are the things I'm not allowed to do. I'm not allowed to call not paying taxes evil, and I'm not allowed to call propagating non-truth evil. Those are Weasley things. So, for instance, if you've got this awesome UU church who's never contributed to any homophobic causes, or the UU General Council, or if you've got this awesome Buddhist temple that, Christian religious institution. It has to be a Christian religious institution.
Oh, okay.
Because it doesn't work with, someone was like, how does this challenge work? And I'm like, yeah, no, any religious institution. They were like, anyone, like a Jain temple? And I was like, no, Christian. So sorry, the challenge is to Christian religious institutions, because the truth is that while one could make the slightly unfair argument that like, UUs are all a bunch of atheists and they know it, like they don't claim to be atheists, so giving them their due is fair. But like, I think that UUs and Buddhists, and even I would argue less, but some like Old Testament or Jewish identifying congregations are now so entirely centered around Enlightenment or secular values, and so disassociated from the larger harms created by religion in society, that it would be unfair to lump all religion into the same thing. Much as one, right. It would be like saying all religion of any kind is evil, right? As opposed to all religion of any kind is problematic, which is what I believe. But yeah, my $100 challenge has been find a Christian institution anywhere in the United States that has not directly funded evil. like dollars in the hands of evil, $100 to the charity of your choice. I have been saying this on and off the air for 5 or 6 years, and I still have my $100. I've never lost my $100. I achieved it with a Quaker Brotherhood, which I was very, very proud of.
Oh, you found it.
I achieved a Quaker Brotherhood.
Yeah, well, the Quakers are really interesting, and I don't necessarily want to go down that tangent, but like, it's really funny how like, well, maybe I'm mixing up. It's not just the Quakers; it's the Amish. Like, nobody calls them a cult either because they're like, you know, they're somewhat open and like they let their kids go, and you know they have the Rumspringa and everything, and like as bad as they are, like they have a patriarchal society and everything, like, you know, they aren't like some of the other things that other religious identities have, like, you know, like shielding people from information and propagandizing and stuff. But
right, and I would argue that the Amish definitely do that. There are huge problems within the Amish community, and actually the sort of idea that we as outsiders have of Rumspringa is often very different than what kids, especially women within the Amish movement, get to do. We sort of picture them changing into t-shirt and jeans like us, but girls are often like, so one of the stories we reported a few years ago is that girls were all put on a bus, driven to the middle of Manhattan, walked around by someone's mom in like a circle, put back on the bus, and then driven back, and that was their Rumspringa. So it depends on the community. I would definitely say that, like, when it comes to between the Quakers and the Amish, which are two very different groups, the Amish are definitely certainly more problematic. They have a lot more inborn problems. The Quakers, you know, hold you in the light, brothers in the circle. I attended a Quaker service for years and years just because the language around it was so poetic and awe-inspiring that even though there was BS behind some members, because of the egalitarian nature of it, no one ever, you don't have the opportunity to impose that belief because it's just like your turn to talk in the circle. So I don't know. I think the communal aspects of Quakerism.
Yeah, that sounds like the right religion for me. But that, you know, me associating those two probably just shows my ignorance of Quakerism. But, you know, I do think that's interesting, and I don't think I would take up your $100 challenge, even though I think it's potentially possible to beat you. But if I do, I'll donate $100 to some charity.
Yeah,
somewhere,
let me know if you nail it, and I'll match.
Sounds good. Sounds good.
Do some good.
So, but you know, the most recent time you brought it up, I found it. This I'm not here for like gotchas, but it was very funny that you brought up that challenge on the most recent time you brought it up on Scathing, because I think later you had listener questions where somebody asked, "Don't you feel bad for supporting PureFlix and like buying all these Christian movies?"
Yeah.
And like, yeah, all of you recognize, like, this is obviously potentially some behind the curtain stuff, but like, I'm sure you guys have talked about it, and it's like, yeah, we should probably donate to charities to offset this thing.
Yeah, we you know, it was brought up by a listener, and it was obvious the moment we did it. And it's one of those things where not only was it like a very well-deserved gotcha moment, but it was also a moment where it was like, great, so we figured out this thing. How do we make it better? Now, we were lucky in that the listener was like, I don't know, maybe you just want to match or beat it with, you know, charity donations. So we decided that we were going to match or beat anything that we gave to the movies that we watched or the things that we rented or the subscription that we had. And then we were going to beat it to other and better charities. But it's funny, when Noah and Heath and I were talking about it and setting it up, we were talking about it. And the thing that we didn't want to do is we didn't want to come off like defensive. when we were talking about it on the show. We didn't want to be like, well, obviously we're only doing it to make fun of it. We're balancing the harm. And when we first wrote the piece, it came off very defensive, right? It came very like, oh, well, here we are trying to help people. And then you're calling us out for a $14 subscription. And when we realized is when we let go of that and just went, yeah, this is a great suggestion. Like, let's counterbalance this. Let's eliminate the harm as far as possible. I will point out, and I think I can talk about it here, which is that what I wanted to answer was my truth, which is that I have spent very little money on Christian movies. And the answer to how I do that is I look great in an eye patch and with a peg leg. So I will just say that. But we as a company spend money, and that's important to recognize that we have put dollars and cents into the pockets of the people that we're trying to arbitrate the harm of. And much like, this is going to sound so pompous, like to keep this clip forever so that if anyone ever wonders if I'm the worst person, much like veganism, it's not about being perfect. It's about doing what you can, right? So if you're moderating harm, whether that's through veganism or just meatless Mondays, or even just finding locally sourced meat that's treated well, we are the not quite vegans of supporting Christianity. We're the vegetarians. We love our cheese.
As somebody with the vegetarian diet, that I could go off on that tangent. I will say, I just want to say, making small changes does help. Like, go without meat for a week and try it out. But like, I don't want to go off on that. You're so great because we could do this for I could do it for 3 hours. You're whatever. I do. So I sent you a link to my local UU church, which I do think has done a lot of good. I'm happy to relay some of the good works they've done. But you mentioned that their governing body, you mentioned in a message to me that their governing body may not have quite a clean record. And I do want to hear your thoughts on that regarding the UU church.
Yeah. So generally, I think people are not aware of the actions and financial contributions of the UU General Assembly. So the first thing to keep in mind about the UU General Assembly, and I find these to be problematic, they are not money that I would want to spend. The good news is, at no point am I going to be like, so it turns out the UU's donated $80 million against gay marriage. They're all things that I would consider edge cases that we can all reasonably disagree on. One of the things that they do is the UU General Assembly in the past, I don't know if it's this year because I haven't looked into it, but the UU General Assembly in the past has supported I forget what the actual name is called, but it's a policeman's fund that supports the policeman's union. And that particular fund and union are known for providing cover for police brutality, broken windows policing, etc. So that's one thing that I think most UUs are probably not aware their money goes to. The other thing is, like, if you look into the politics and you actually look into like sort of the problems of what have come up over the last year or two in the UU church, especially when it comes to like overseeing whole areas and zones, specifically a woman of color who had been with the institution for 20 something years was passed over for a white gentleman who had like half of her tenure and was in fact demoted and given like less money and less authority and less power. And when the UU church and the UU General Assembly was asked about it, they were just like, well, what are we going to do? It's not right. And like there was talk within the UU community, and it's not the Baptist Conference, which wrote the Nashville Statement, right? Or the Methodist Church, which recently released their traditional family plan. But there are large-scale institutions collecting tens of millions of otherwise incredibly progressive people's dollars and putting them places that I think they would disagree. So for instance, one of the things that I always look into, and maybe people totally disagree with this, but like, and again, I don't want to say that I know the numbers now because they could have vastly changed. I could be wrong. UU Church volunteers all of its stuff to Charity Star, both at a branch and a national level. So you can check it out. But like when I look at the salaries and the standing salaries of people who are part of the UU General Council, those are high. Those are higher than I want them to be. These are not full-time jobs. This is not what people do for a living. These people also have jobs and corporate interests a lot of the time. And so when I see them getting a 6-figure salary that could otherwise be donated to charity, and when I see charity donations or operational funds escalating into the tens of millions of dollars, look, I'm not an accountant, I'm not a lawyer, but I think when we look at those monetary values, they don't represent what is often being sold by a Unitarian Universalist church, which is like, hey man, we just got this building, come on over, play hacky sack, and we'll sing some songs about love.
Yeah, and like, that is something to think about. I think it very much corresponds with a parallel trend in like other organizations that are not religious, that like on the face of it we might support. Something like the HRC, like the Human Rights Commission.
Absolutely.
Which at this point like kind of almost exists to keep itself alive. So as long as it can keep on brand, it can like have a high paid CEO. They can throw garish fundraising parties for that. And it's not just HRC. Like, this is like a huge problem. Like, this also happens in academia and universities. Like, I think a lot of administrative bloat, that's not a function of any underlying belief, except the notion that we do good things, therefore we have to do what's best for us, therefore pay our president like a 6-figure salary or something like that. And like, one of the things I would caution you and pause to think about is like, this is bad. Like, I'm not apologizing for UU church, I'm not even a UU person, but like, if you're going to make that criticism, there are like non-religious causes that get those institutional and structural problems due to like hierarchies that don't come necessarily as a function of like some supernatural belief.
Absolutely. And I don't think there's anything supernatural about the problem. I think it's important that we hold those organizations to a higher standard even than the ones that we would hold other charities to, because it's all voluntary, right? The thing that makes all of it so scary, that makes it so crazy scary, is that if the Unitarian Universalist Church decided tomorrow to take all of the funds and give them to the president of the Unitarian General Assembly, right? There is no law against that, right? Their charity rating might go down, but they could also just stop revealing their funding, right? We have no idea. And those laws are not in place for other charities, right? Other charities always have to disclose that. So while I totally agree, and to use a more extreme example, something like Autism Speaks, which was for years one of my favorite charities, just because of my ignorance, right? I saw it everywhere. I have autism in my family. I've worked with autistic kids and I wanted to do good, and it's everywhere, right? Light It Up Blue and all that stuff. And so I was donating money, and someone pointed out, they were like, hey man, this is a terrible organization. And I was like, man, what do you know? And again, I got very lucky in that someone was willing to sit down and educate me and explain to me the things that I didn't know and point me in the direction of better resources and better places. But like, that times 1,000 built on top of epistemological ontology, right? Which I think less so with the Unitarian Universalists, but every
they don't have a firm epistemology as it is.
Right. Yeah. I mean, they do have what I would call extraordinary claims in their guiding principles, right? Like, we are all connected, which I guess pedantically we could be like, everyone's got photons or something. But
yeah, well, I mean, sure. Like, I think we could nitpick that.
Absolutely. No, I totally agree. But like, what we have to understand about even in the wokest of churches, right? There is all of these cautionary things built on top of ontology, right? Which is, again, where I think we disagree, because I'm a religious essentialist, is underneath all of this and at the core cause of all of this is we don't pay taxes, we don't do this, we don't do that, we don't have to disclose our stuff because we know the ultimate truth about the universe, or at least we claim to. Right. And I think this is where we disagree, which is that and I'll straw man, I'll steel man my own position, and you can tell me if I'm doing it correctly. Which is that basically the Westboro Baptist Church, right, as awful as they are, as terrible and mean and bigoted as they are correct about what God said, right? And at core, religion is a claim. It's a series of claims, and there is nothing intertextually that deals with secularization, with Enlightenment values, right? Which is what I think makes me a religious essentialist. Is absolutely there are woke churches that accept gay and trans and, you know, all sorts of kinds of people, and that's wonderful. They are wonderful people, and I want more of that. Like you and like everyone, I want more of that. But it's important for us to recognize that what causes that is Enlightenment values and a lack of religion, which I want people to move away from. But when someone turns to me like Pete Buttigieg, love Mayor Pete, right? But when Mayor Pete says that the Bible tells you to love your gay neighbor, he is not talking about the book I have read, right? Which means that either he is purposefully ignoring sections of that book or he's lying. And that's where I think my religious essentialism butts up against the progressivism and the acceptance of otherwise progressive religious groups.
Yeah. So I will. Yeah. This goes very deeply between us because, and actually I should disclose, this channel does make video essays, and I'm currently editing a video about this very topic: is religion bad? And it's sort of me moving on a little away from focusing on religion. But one of the things I did put in the script and that I've already shot is that I don't think religion is this list of claims and what we might call like, it's not even just a list of claims, because there's also prescriptions in the book, like thou shalt not do this, thou shalt not do that. Right. And so there are epistemological claims and there are also prescriptive claims. But like, if you look at any sort of cultural product, there's a lot more to it. Like there's nothing in the scriptures that like prescribe like the structure of the Vatican, like how the church should organize. And there's nothing in the Bible that says David A.R. White needs to continue his movie career. Like there's I
don't know, like, there's the apocalypse.
Right. It makes a lot more sense to me to see, say, Christianity, and I shouldn't say Christianity because, like, let's say like a religious community as like a cultural group, and I think that has far more power. Like I'll agree with you on the Buttigieg thing, because the homophobia in the book actually was very instrumental in converting me, and I couldn't make the pieces fit. So like 100% on board with you there. Like anyone who says the Bible is pro-gay, actually, like I don't see how they can reconcile it. But like if you look at other things that have transformed our structure in our society, a lot of times it's been like a broad, vague cultural identity. Like the Southern strategy was like dog whistling like white identity to win people over. It wasn't saying, you know, racism is good. It was like appealing to a broad, vague cultural power. And I think that largely has impacted the ontology of our politics today. And all this is just going to say that, you know, it's easy for us to to reduce a cultural product to one essential list, and that does make it easier for us to like argue with people like that. But if you had to like ask me, like, take a bet on me, like how do I think the religion manifests, it's less that everybody has this list of terms and conditions and clicks without reading it, which is somewhat true, but it's also like they've been thrust into this community of people, and they've developed what it means to be a good person through interpersonal contact, and not necessarily through scripture.
I think you make a brilliant point there, and it's something that not enough atheists take into account, right?
Mhm.
Not everyone is our parody of religion. Not everyone is our straw man of religion. Where I would make a special claim for religion as opposed to the Southern strategy or socialism or conservatism or any
Mhm.
other cultural product, Gamergate, anything, any other cultural product. Religion is the only cultural product that is based on an ontological claim, right?
Mhm.
Conservatism is very important to people. It's the core of a lot of people's values, but they don't make claims at the core of it about truth. And the
Mhm.
problem is, if your philosophy doesn't have a claim about truth at the core of it, right? Essential, unchangeable truth, right? At the
Mhm.
core of it, then yes, I think it's absolutely a cultural product. And to reduce it down to essentialism is unfair because there's nothing essential about something that doesn't make truth claims. But
Mhm.
because religion, one, is based on truth claims, and two, until very recently, murdered people for accepting anything except those truth claims, I think we feed our enemies. I think we feed the people who are hunting us and killing us and putting evil into the world by giving them the cape of modification or the cape of liberalism that they
Mhm.
don't actually wear. So my answer to that would be absolutely religion is a cultural product, and we need to address cultural products vastly differently. But at the core, what makes religion different from any other cultural product is a claim of ultimate truth, which is
Mhm.
why I think it's justified to reduce it down to its essential prescriptivism.
Mhm. Yeah, and I think I think I'd agree with you actually, that as far as like ontological, like empirical claims, like it's most obviously the largest institution like founded on like this epistemology. Though, I could like make comments about like mythology, about, American exceptionalism and like white
Sure, absolutely.
nationalism,
Yeah.
but like I think your point broadly stands. And one thing I do want to let me get at this another way. There is sort of this socialist strain uh, that maybe I could pejoratively characterize as something like class reductionism, and that's, everything uh, ultimately comes down to material benefits, like, all the structural societal problems come down to who's getting funded, who profits off of it, who gets to pay off the politicians, things like that. And I actually think that I've developed a stronger sense of like that material effect on society, and have been wanting to push away from that effect. But like, I wouldn't ever call myself a class reductionist, because I don't think people are rational enough to always figure out like the best way of gaining material wealth. But also, like, I do think there are other significant effects, including religion and other bigotries like racism and classism and sexism. Like, I don't think well, classism is class reductionist, but like, I do, as I have this concern with lots of socialists, as somebody who I am a socialist, like, I I'm wary of people who always want to reduce everything to class or monetary problems. and on a similar vein, I'm worried of anyone, particularly the type of person I used to be like 5 years ago, who thought religion causes literally everything bad, like literally the Hitchens version of, religion poisons everything. Like, I don't know if religious reductionism is a thing, but if I've very explicitly expelled that from my perspective, and I'm wondering to what extent you think religion is at the core of all these other problems.
So here's what I'll say. I will say that there's not a single evil. Sorry, let me say this better. There's not a single empowered evil in our world today that is not directly and, more importantly, openly funded by religion.
Mm-hmm.
That said, I don't believe that religion is the root cause of
Mm-hmm.
all evil. There's lots of, and I think people have defined it better as like tribalism being a better cause of problems because religion is an outgrowth of tribalism. So I definitely would never say that religion is the root cause of all evil. What I would say is there is no empowered evil in the world today, or in my opinion, in history, maybe. I feel like that's not a good claim, but I will definitely say in the world today, there's no empowered act of evil that is not directly and, more importantly, openly funded by religion, right? Every bathroom bill, every anti-trans law, every heartbeat bill, everything from slavery to ziplining. It's all got religion. It's hard. Sorry, I was trying to think of evil things and ziplining came into my head. I don't think ziplining is openly funded by religion.
Are lawns openly funded by religion? Because I have a very distinct hatred for lawns.
There we go.
That's my pet hatred thing.
These lawns.
Yeah, though I think if you think of things in terms of that, you could very easily get to like a monetary system, like a monetary system too, because like once you say any institution that has been funded by let me try and rephrase what you said. All the evils in the world are, ultimately funded by some religious group. Like, another way to phrase it is like all the empowered evils in the world are funded, so
sure.
like, yeah, so like I'm just saying there's another tack that some of my class reductionist friends might take
sure
in that. Yeah. And so like, if you're Jeff Bezos and it doesn't matter what anyone says, it doesn't even matter what your religion is, if you want to keep your workers from peeing so you can fly to Mars, like, you basically have whatever you have in your power to like work towards that project, and that is worrisome. So like I don't know, like I'm not trying to dispel you. Well, I am, but like I do, like I'm just trying to give a different tack about that very legitimate concern.
Yeah, and when it's reduced down to funding, that's absolutely true that it applies to lots of things. But religion is magical in that it doesn't need funding to harm, right? Like if you, me and Anna, when we very first started on scathing, I don't think I was on scathing at the point. My wife and I wrote a song called "If You Want to Make Good People Do Bad Things," and it was all about like the best way to make genuinely good, caring people do terrible things is to make them religious, right? There are parents who will run into a burning building to save their baby boy or girl. But then a few years later, when that kid comes out as gay or trans, they will kick them out of the house. And there's no funding required to do that. There's no money or class interchange. There's no race. It is simply religion, right? That is a special power of religion. And I think it makes it acutely problematic in that sense. And I think as humanists concerned with the symptoms, I'll say, of the disease, I think if we don't talk about the disease itself, right? If we don't talk about the underlying cause of those problems will always be chasing symptoms.
Mhm.
Will always be treating fevers and not the disease.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I totally 100% agree with you on that, and I think part of why we care about this is because we want to make sure the disease is one that we nail down right. And I still don't think there is necessarily one disease. Even at with my anti-corporate rant just there, but
Mhm.
like I think that speaks broadly to also like red pilling, inceldom. I think I agreed very strongly with one of your earlier points about in-group out-group behavior, because I think one of the things we both seem to like agree with is like there's this cultural milieu, and like if you want your group or your status in that group to be stable, if you want your lifestyle to be stable, which also kind of ties into class, like you can engage in very irrational behaviors, and being in communities with epistemological blinders and mythologies certainly does not help with that. Yeah.
Mhm. And what I would say is that when we look at groups that we might not necessarily associate with religion, watching how religion empowers them, right?
Hmm.
So the difference of early Gamergate until mid to late Gamergate, where it became empowered by white supremacy, which we know is largely financially and just like supported in numbers by the church, right? We
Hmm.
know that white supremacy is supported direct line by Baptist
Hmm.
churches and Anglican churches in the Deep South. Like that's where those monies come from. And until the harassment machine of the church was put behind Gamergate, it was a relatively small movement, right? Pretty much everyone saw it for what it was until
Wait, what was
these.
the church link for Gamergate? Like,
So, long story short, is
as is
all
the
of
case
the
with Gamergate
yeah
in
yeah
general.
all of the troll farms that eventually pivoted Gamergate into a full-on harassment are either directly church funded or
Hmm.
directly white supremacy funded, which were in turn funded by the church, right? Sort of the
Hmm.
leaderless resistance of 1977 that comes from the KKK and the connections there to churches and the financial exposure that's been done. Um, I'm forget Corey Robin's book, The Blank Mind,
Oh, the reactionary mind.
Reactionary Mind,
Yeah,
breaks it down really well. There's another one called like the
I
multi.
didn't know. I should read that book. I didn't know he talked about religion. And
It's really he doesn't necessarily talk about religion, but he talks about the
mhm,
funding of white supremacy post 1977 diaspora,
mhm,
um, and what happened with that. But basically, long story short, and with very broad, mostly untrue claims in place to make it simplified, troll farms made up of actual white supremacists knowingly used church funds that were knowingly given to white supremacists to
mhm,
empower a movement that didn't have power up until that point, right?
mhm,
We think of Gamergate as a largely secular movement, but from Gamergate even to someone like Jordan Peterson, right? Jordan Peterson is a joke until he finds support from the Catholic, not the Catholic Church, the Lutheran Church or
yeah.
whatever it
Well,
is.
his
And
spiritual beliefs are just.
right,
He's
but
a
like
postmodern religion person, if
yeah,
there
his
ever was one.
and he's a religious apologist, right? Milo
Yeah.
is a Catholic apologist, right? These are these
Hmm.
things that like we associate these people with their secular activities, but without the core of religion to support them both financially and in action, they lose their power. Right. It's
Hmm.
why there's a million troll accounts on YouTube that we'll never hear about because they don't appeal enough to religion. And it's
Hmm.
why when someone takes a turn towards the alt right or the far right, they lose the atheist side of their personality faster and faster, right? Dave Rubin is the great example of this, right? He started out as an atheist. Well, he started out as a Golden Girls commentator, but then he was like the atheist YouTube guy. And then I think it was last year or so in one of his talkbacks, he was like, I never said I'm an atheist. I said, I think that there's something out there that's magic, or whatever he said.
Well, yeah. And I will say there's a lot of astroturfing when it comes to YouTube. And again, that also comes down to, you know, conservatives want to push the culture war, and they often do want to rope in religious people because that's a very consolidated voting block for historical reasons. But also, if you compare and contrast it to like class reductionism, like they have very economically rational reasons to like fund that stuff that don't come with the religious ontology that comes with it. So
right. Or even if you look at something like TERFs, right, trans exclusive radical feminists, right, the core of all of that is religion, right? All their money, all of their power, it always comes from religion, right? People who fly over from London to here to harass US politicians do it on evangelical churches' dimes. And they do tours of churches after they do those major secular motivated actions because that's where their next dollar amount is coming from.
Yeah. Well, I think, we should wrap up. Like I would suggest like questioning whether it's the cart before the horse in a lot of these cases, because a lot of wealth is generated on a very secure voting block. But like I don't want to go over time because you've been generous with your time, but I did want to get to one more thing at past the hour mark. Aaron Rabinowitz, my other Jewish meditation guru, came into the chat, and he asked if we had defined religion yet. So to close out, I don't know if I have a definition. So I'll give you the last word, and then you can define religion in the most silly, reductionist, absurd, non-functional form you would like. So Eli Bosnick, my Jewish meditation guru, what is a religion?
All right, let me put this carefully and in a way that will not be misconstrued, won't be put in the wrong way. Religion is Muslims. Done.
There we go.
All Muslims are everybody.
All Muslims are religion. All right. Well,
and all religions are Islam. Hey, we could turn the culture around overnight. We get that going viral. Hashtag all religions are Islam. Pat Robertson will be like, fuck it, where's the guy? Mwah. Come here, Brad. I've always loved you.
I'm about to be kicked out of every left book group I've ever been in. But all right, that's great. We think Muslims are bad because they're bad people. That's what we should walk away from this channel from. Okay, well, thank you so much for your time, Eli. Like, I'm really glad we had a chance to be quote unquote face to face and talk about this.
I want all of my conversations to go this way forever, please.
Absolutely. So, in order to promote yourself on this channel, could you please let the good people in the channel and the religion, the Twitter feed? Well, now I'm a cult leader. The good people in the podcast feed, let them know your shows, your contact info, all the stupid podcast stuff that
my shows are The Scathing Atheist, God Awful Movies, The Skeptocrat, and Citation Needed on iTunes, Stitcher, and wherever else podcasts live.
All right, and if you want to follow Eli at Eli Bosnick and tell him all the reasons he's wrong, please do that. Never let him up on that. And he's a racist because he thinks all religions are Muslim, and that's a race. So.
Excellent.
All right. Thank you so much, Eli. Have fun watching your stupid Christian movies.
I'm off to go find out about aliens and Jesus.
Okay. Cheers. Okay, I'll